gates.
Does anyone else need to read out?
Oh, look at this. Be going in there in a bit. Wow. Nice to walk down here. In that castle in a bit as well. Cardiff Castle. People are right on the top of it. We're having a tour in 20 minutes in the clock tower, which will be good as well. Whoa.
That's a newer building. That's the north wing that was actually built in the 1780s for the first Marquess of Bute. All the brownstone buildings that you see, that's the work of William Burges. He arrived in 1865 to do work for the third Marquess of Bute, and he was quite keen to build this clock tower because he'd designed it a couple of years earlier. He had the plans for it in his mind probably much earlier than that, and he was quite keen to get it built in Cardiff Castle. So this was the opportunity that he got, and he took full use of it. So he actually demolished the old south wing, which is obstructed now by where the trees are, to build the guest tower and the clock tower, and there it is. Now, would you believe that was the tallest building in Cardiff when it was completed in 1874? It stands at 150 feet high. On the outside, you've got the 5 shields that represent the 5 important families that came together over the centuries through marriage to create this great Bute dynasty. So going from left to right, you've got the Herbert shield, Crichton, Stewart, which is directly above the clock with the gold finish and the blue and white squares. Then you've got the Montague family to the right with the 3 red diamonds. And then on the extreme right with the cross, that's the Windsor family. But don't get too excited, it's nothing to do with the royal family, because people often say, oh, royalty. No, it's a different Windsor family. Below that, you've got these statues, 9-foot statues, decorative statues, which represent some of the planets. So on the east side, you can see Venus and Mercury. On the north side, which is overlooking the South Wales valleys, you've got the moon. On the far side, on the west side, Jupiter and Saturn. And on the south side, overlooking the stadium and the rest of the city, you've got Mars and Saturn. They're ornaments, but this is what Burges tended to do. He was very, very creative. So there you go, that's the clock tower from the outside. So shall we have a look? Right, okay. So if you stand by the green rope behind you and then face me, pretend you're going back to school for a maths lesson, everybody's favourite subject. Right, let's have a quick check to see where everybody's from. So where are you from?
US.
US, which state?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Better than South?
Absolutely.
There we go. Always ask. Where are you from?
Spain.
Spain. Madrid?
Madrid? No.
Madrid.
Ciudad Real.
Souls.
Ciudad Real. Have you heard about Don Quixote?
Yeah.
The book, the famous book by Cervantes?
Oh, right, okay. Spain.
Spain. Near Toledo.
Where are you from?
New York City.
New York City. Been there once. Nice. Very nice city. Busy.
No.
Lots of yellow cabs.
Bridget.
Bridget, a bit closer to home.
Argentina.
Argentina. Buenos Aires. Yeah, excellent.
Born in Cardiff.
Well, you live in Argentina, born in Cardiff.
No, born in Cardiff, from Wales,
Fab.
South Wales.
Yeah, good. Good knock the flat. Right, so welcome then to the...
And Vicky, not Don.
You live in London, but you're from Japan. What part of Japan? Tokyo?
Tokyo.
Tokyo. Well, you're good at something. Yes, okay. She's shadowing me today. She's going to be a pest, I can see. Right, so welcome then to the Clock Tower tour. A little bit of history first about the castle before we go and complete the actual tower. The site itself is 2,000 years old. Before you ask, I wasn't here then, just in case. But the Romans were here, and they stayed for about 400 years. And then we had the Normans here in the 11th century, and they built the Norman Keep. Has anybody climbed the keep yet? Make sure you do. Fantastic. Yeah, well, lovely views, isn't it? You can see well out there. In 1776, a Scottish aristocratic family from the Isle of Bute in Scotland. They arrived through marriage when the first Marquess of Bute married Charlotte Jane Windsor. Now, the Windsor family owned the castle for most of the 18th century, and of course in those days, as soon as a gentleman married a very wealthy woman, he would inherit everything. Property, money became the gentleman's. Those days are long gone. It was the grandson of the first Marquess of Bute who then became the second Marquess of Bute, a very intelligent man, realised that not only did he own Cardiff Castle, but he owned most of South Wales, the land. That gave him the rights to the minerals, and of course the coal masters who developed the coal industry there made them one of the wealthiest families in the world. In 1847, the wife of the second Marquess gave birth to this gentleman here, John Patrick Crichton Stewart, who became the third Marquess of Bute. When he's 6 months old, his father passes away here in Cardiff, and he becomes the richest baby in the world. But he couldn't touch any of the money until he was 21, so they had trustees to look after the money on his behalf. In 1865, the trustees decided the castle was looking a little bit stale and tired and could do with a little bit of DIY. So what they did, they invited William Burges to the castle, a very eccentric Victorian architect, brilliant man. He had designed Cork Cathedral in Ireland and built it as well. I used to go drinking with Oscar Wilde, the Irish poet. They were very, very close friends. And when he arrives in 1865, like I said to you on the outside, when we were having a chat outside, he was quite keen to build this tower. Just bear in mind the Bute family was very wealthy. They owned about 15 properties altogether. So they only actually visited Cardiff Castle for about 6 weeks of the year, which is astonishing really when you think of what the castle had to offer. But that's the way it was. He would put on a banquet for all the local politicians and the business people every time he did visit, and then after the banquet the ladies would go off and spend some time with Lady Gwendolyn, his wife, but all the gentlemen would come into this room. This was very much like a Victorian gentleman's club, just this one room. No ladies were allowed in here. That was the rule of the day. So what they would do, they would smoke cigars and opium. They would smoke opium because that was allowed in those days. So instead of counting 6 windows, it was often 18. Because they didn't have a clue where they were because of the opium. They used to drink lots of whiskey and wine. Now where Burgess is very, very clever, because this is the clock tower, the theme is time. So if you look at the vault of the ceiling, you've got the 12 zodiac signs. On each of the 4 walls, Fred Weeks illustrates the 4 seasons of the year. For example, on the east wall, it depicts winter. We are talking northern hemisphere, not southern hemisphere, of course. So we've got Capricorn, Aquarius and Pisces up there. From winter we go to spring on the south wall, from spring to summer on the west wall, and from summer to autumn on the north wall above the chimney piece. Now if you look back to the south wall at the stained glass windows, these are the Norse gods. Now the Saxons named the days of the week after these gods. So going from left to right, you've got Marni, Tuath, Woden, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Look to the west wall, you've got Thor, Freya, Saturn, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Brilliant architect, shame he couldn't count. Well, you can. If you look above the chandelier, that's where you put the sun, representing Sunday. Talking of the sun, he tracks the journey of the sun in this very room. The sun rises in the east, sets in the west. So in the southeast corner, you've got the sun god holding the sun, representing sunrise, holding it aloft there, representing midday. Going from east to west, so in the northwest corner, you've got Luna, the moon goddess, beginning to cover the sun, with the moon representing sunset, and here with the moon completely covering the sun, representing nighttime. Now this chimney piece was designed by William Burges. The sculptor was Thomas Nichols, a very talented sculptor from London. He worked with Burgess on a lot of the big projects that he actually did. On the top you've got a Moor, the figure of love. You've got the sign of Capricorn. This is the winter smoking room. So that's why we've got the goat representing Capricorn, which is one of the winter zodiac signs in the northern hemisphere. This is Latin, and it reads Liverpool 5, Manchester United 0. I'm joking. Love conquers all. It is all yield to love. And because this is the winter smoking room, what Burgess did, he put medieval winter scenes. So you've got hunting going on for food, obviously keeping warm, and ice skating. Now this wooden buffet was valued about 8 or 9 years ago at £1 million. It's where they hid opium. Aha. And underneath a salorette, which is a posh name for a big drawer that pulls out. And in there you can store up to 40 bottles of whiskey and rum. That's enough to keep you going for a couple of years. If you're only visiting the castle for about 6 weeks of the year, that would keep you going for a while. But being a Scottish family, that would probably last about 2 days. Because they do like their whiskey, don't they? Yeah? Yeah, you don't know? Oh, yeah, they do. I've had about 30 Scotsmen, when Wales are playing Scotland in either rugby or football, I've had 30 Scots in here on a tour with their kilts on, and I tell them that, and they all disagree with me. They say, no, Taff, it wouldn't last 2 days, it would be 10 hours. So that's all I need you to do. As you go through the first door, do look up, and you will see Typhon, a Greek god, put there by Burgess to scare the ladies away. Because he always used to say to his gentlemen friends, if you don't scare the ladies away, they will stand outside and they will listen in to your conversation. As if you would do that, girls. Okay, so if you follow me now, let's go up to the back of the center.
Greek god. Whoa.
It's a nice day up there. So the bachelor bedroom doesn't look very appealing, mind the bed, does it? It's difficult to know how often he actually slept in it, because he got married in 1872. That was the same year that this room was finished, and they were only in for about 6 weeks of the year. So it's difficult to actually tell how much time he would have actually spent in this room. Now, where Burges is clever again, he expands on the theme, because they were making money through the coal industry. So he decides in this room to put up some examples of taking things to sell on to make money. So let me show you a couple of examples. If we look to the north wall, you've got some ironworks going on, bottom left, glass, so you're extracting things from the ground. Hermes, the alchemist, above the chimneypiece, thought he could turn base metal into gold. And on the very top, you've got elephants being killed for ivory. Very cruel, of course, they're trying to outlaw it, but some countries still persist with that, which is a shame. So there you go. So it's taking to sell on. And on the south wall, this is a bit more straightforward, fishing. So they're taking the fish to market to sell on to make money. So when you think of mineral wealth, you also think of precious stones, of course, don't you? Very often. So you've got rubies and topaz in the south windows. You've got sapphire and emerald in the west windows. Okay, just pass.
Sorry.
It's okay. Diamonds and pearls in each window. And this chimney piece was a little bit more straightforward, you know, compared to the winter smoking room downstairs. So you've got the Marquess's coronet, you've got the Crichton Stewart coat of arms, Crichton family represented by the blue lions, Stewart by the blue and white squares. And these are examples of stone that have actually been taken from the Boot estate. Burgess thought it would be a very, very good idea if we could just put the stones there just to represent mineral wealth from the actual Boot estate itself. Do have a look at the ensuite bathroom. Pink alabaster, which is a very strong stone, smoothed down, looks very, very nice, but very, very strong. You've also got a marble bath that's been imported from Rome. Nobody seems to know the cost. It would have been really large amounts of money that people would have thought. And what Burgess also does with the bath, he puts those metal inserts in there, sea creatures, and the idea is that when the bath is all the furniture that you see in here was actually designed by Burgess himself. So you've got a water basin, a dressing table, and a divan. And lots of Burgess collectors will pay a large amount of money for those items. So if they actually went up onto a website, selling them off, you're talking about £50,000, £75,000, £100,000, and people would pay that. Okay then. So once you've taken your decks, let's go to the bell chamber. Are you the last one?
I think so, yeah.
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 Okay. Yes, indeed. So the bell chamber, the clock on the outside, so we're up now to the clock level with the statues either side, the other side of the wall. This bell was installed at the same time. John Warner, a very famous bell maker from London. They owned about 7 foundries, I think, across the city of London and Windsor. And they actually supplied the very first bell that we know today is Big Ben in the Houses of Parliament in London. They actually provided the very first bell. We detach it during the summer months for these tours, but I'm just going to tap it now, okay? That's just a little tap. The hammer would come up there, and then bang. So you can just imagine how loud it actually gets. And the sound there, people, you have to be in control of it. book. We made it very difficult for the maids who came up here making those sandwiches to look at the fantastic views, because I mentioned earlier this was the highest building in Cardiff, so that you had a direct view of the sea. No? Is it the first time you've come to Cardiff Castle?
I've been to Castle, but I've never been
At the
high
clock
up.
tower, yeah.
Yeah.
You probably came as a child, did you, to school?
Maybe, but I've been as an adult. I think maybe someone would be in like Den or something when I came.
Yeah, I know. Last one? Yes. Sun Smoker Room, once described in a magazine many years ago as Britain's most extraordinary room. And you can see why. If you look up at the clerestory, you've got the 4 elements that are required for life to be sustained. So you've got air, earth, fire and water. Illustrations up there were done by Fred Weeks. And you've also got these little reflectors, see the circular reflectors at the very top, up in the roof. Yeah. They're like mirrors. So the idea was you got Helios, the sun god, on the chariot wheel, and what they would do, the maids would come up here when it was getting dark and they'd light the candles, and then the flicker of the flame would reflect back down from the mirrors. So it was literally like looking up at the stars, yeah? And it worked a treat. The room is really dominated by tiles, lots of tiles on the walls and the floor. And we've also got these support structures as well, these columns made of marble and pink alabaster, very, very tough, strong stone. And we believe the reason why Burges did that was to support the weight of the clerestory above us. We've also got 2 classical wings in each corner, south, west, east, and this is the north. Aquilo and Septentrion, dressed in the Scandinavian costumes, classical winds, the north winds, and they're actually positioned roughly where the north wind blows. So they weren't actually put there just by chance, they were actually positioned roughly where the north wind would blow from. We've got 2 famous astronomers in each corner of the room as well. I'll point out just a couple. We've got Sir Isaac Newton, who's buried in Westminster Abbey in London. And we've also got Herschel, who's credited with discovering the planet Uranus in 1781. So he features there too. On the walls we've got tiles that feature the legends that you associate with the 12 zodiac signs. As for the floor, there was a time when they thought everything revolved around the planet Earth. Of course we know now everything revolves around the sun. But that's what they believed obviously back in the day. So what Burges does, he puts the planet Earth directly under the ebony table, and these creatures and animals that you see going around it are representative of the planets that they thought came around us. As I said, we are just one of those planets that actually orbit around the sun, but of course they didn't have the technology to prove that back then. Wonderful views of the city, as I mentioned. There's the west side, you can see Cardiff Cathedral. To the south windows you can actually see the stadium, home of the Welsh rugby team. These days they hold lots of different events there, like concerts. Ed Sheeran was there just a couple of weeks back, Coldplay played there, Madonna. You know, the list is now endless. They have Speedway there as well, Grand Prix, lots of different things taking place. East side of the city, you can see St John's Church, Just to the right, one of the oldest buildings in Cardiff, it might be one of all. You can sit on the inside to enjoy the warmth of the fire, or to talk. Remember the days when people spoke to each other instead of texting and WhatsApping and messaging and everything else, TikTok. Times have changed, but there was a time when people actually spoke to each other. So you could sit on the inside and have a bit of a conversation. The chimney piece again was designed by Burges, the sculptor again, Thomas Nichols. Because this is the summer smoking room, it gives you a feel of summer. So you've got matrimony, courtship, you've got Cupid on the top with the lovebirds on the wrist, because people generally tend to get married in the summer, don't they, as opposed to the winter months. People get married all year round, but I think there's far more weddings in the summer months. Estate Fresco translates to, in summer, my love grows green. There we are, with the grass. So the summer smoking room, with health and safety, put pay to that, because there's a couple of steps on the top that, for some reason, are a little bit narrower than the other steps. And when there was a time we could get away with it, can't get away with it now. Which is a great shame, because you can just imagine what the views are like from up there. Never mind. Don't blame me, blame the council. Would anybody like a picture in front of the chimney?
Look at that. Shit, you can't go up there. Goes on and on. So I had just been on the clock tower tour and it was amazing. Really pretty rooms. Really pretty rooms. Next is this. I have been in here before, like 10, 15 years ago. And then next I'll go to that one.